I have a pretty packed presentation, so I'm going to try to hurry through it. After this, we can all go downstairs to the basement because I have an exhibition there where some of these and more of these items are going to be shown. And if there's any questions, might as well just take them downstairs so I don't take up all the time because it's very interesting. So I'm basically here to provide some sort of history lesson because everybody who's in NFTs thinks it's an Ethereum-only concept, which it isn't because these things existed before. Yeah, there's a couple of arguments I want to preempt, that they're not actually NFTs. They might be things that point to an asset or just tokenized assets themselves. So we're not going to discuss the finer points of what actually constitutes an NFT. You can do that on Twitter all day to great effect, I think. So the term NFT is colloquially used as something that is verifiably scarce and is on the blockchain and points to somewhere or contains the data that it's supposed to represent, right? Let's see how this works. Okay, so there's, I thought the screen would be bigger, but let's just skip this one. So there's a timeline of, of NFTs, and I, as a collector, I pretty much specialize in stuff that happens here, so in the primordial, more or less, of, we jokingly refer to it as vintage NFTs, which is a joke when you think this is, the space is not even 10 years old or so. So beyond this point, it pretty much becomes a mute point to count projects, because every day there's a Freeman, there's a new Discord, there's a new project coming out. And some of the more important ones from before all of you were in the NFT space, probably I'll try to basically just very quickly cover. So it could have been called pre-CryptoKitties, because before punks there were CryptoKitties, but let's disregard that. On 2012, the concept of colored coins was introduced on Bitcoin, which made it possible to trace output of a transaction throughout many outputs, right? And this is basically what the core of an NFT is. You can trace it, you can trace that exact item or coin or token through all of blockchain history. And in 2014, a protocol was invented, the Counterparty protocol, which basically stored metadata in a Bitcoin transaction, right? This was supposed to be used for tokenization of assets, dividend payments, memberships, and so on. So pretty much a DAO token approach of sorts. 2015, the first ever mobile game that utilized blockchain was published also on Bitcoin. We will get into that in a minute. And on 2016, my personal favorite, the rare Pepes, you know, that green frog, no Discord and no Telegram group can live without, and that has been kind of contested as of late, but yeah, also that will be addressed. And then, unbeknownst to most, the first so-called NFTs, if you subscribe or take into account my very loose definition of that, exist on Namecoin, which is a Bitcoin fork. That was actually the purpose of which was to basically provide a namespace based on the blockchain. So people minted their identity on Namecoin, and then you could fill that token with your Bitcoin address, your Ethereum address, your Twitter account, your Facebook profile, or whatever, and obviously point it to a profile picture. And then obviously we all know the Ethereum or Ethereum story of NFTs that started with these useless tiles on Ethereum, curio cards, CryptoPunks, and so on, right? So what I'm trying to say is I make a differentiation between vintage NFTs and historic, because the sales history obviously is more on Ethereum side. So there's the Sotheby's sales of CryptoPunks and of Beeple, obviously, and the Bored Ape Yacht Club. These are huge projects with very big communities and obviously a lot of money in them, more so than in what I call vintage, right? So first little excursus into Namecoin. So when you signed up for Twitter in the first few months, you would get a little egg, right? That makes sense because you hatch from that and then you can tweet as an avatar. And at some point, Twitter changed that avatar. You would get like a pretty nondescript human figure, so to entice people more to upload a profile picture of themselves. A couple of people really disliked that change, and what they did is they used Namecoin to basically tie their Twitter identity to the egg that they just copy, right-click save, basically, from Twitter. And After the NFT space took off, a couple of blockchain archaeologists basically took it upon themselves to scrape the Namecoin blockchain for these kinds of artifacts. There's 277 of them, different colors, different amounts of purple, red, white, blue, or whatever. And this is basically the metadata that's in the token. So you can basically fill it with everything that you want someone else to know about you, and they could go to a website that's called Name Browse and enter your token ID or your name, and then basically you would have your address entry. This is in obviously not very human readable format, but it displays very nicely on the website. The argument could be made that this is buying like someone's expired ENS name. Yeah, that is true, but there's only 277 of them, and they're like super old, so that makes them a perfect target for collecting if you're basically into very old vintage. I like that word just so much stuff. And then there's a community around it that basically invests in other communities, and actually people take their eggs and make Somnium avatars out of them just to flex, right? So because people always ask about utility, if that's not utility, I don't know what. Flexing on the metaverse, right? Short excursus into Counterparty. 2014, as I said, if you make a Bitcoin transaction, there's basically 80 bytes of unused data, and if you have a client that can write and read into a Bitcoin transaction, so you make a transaction and you say, okay, I'm minting this NFT and this points to that image and there's 1,000 of them, then basically someone with another piece of software that's enabled for this protocol can read that, and thus basically a second layer on top of Bitcoin provides the ability to do NFTs. For a while we also discussed to enable EVM, but that was a time when Bitcoin transactions were actually more expensive than Ethereum transactions. And so we didn't, because obviously going through all the steps, but theoretically Counterparty could be EVM compatible, and then you could basically also bridge. But since Counterparty lives on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is full of Bitcoin maxis, which I'm one of, that's probably never going to happen. Spells of Genesis. You will see this card downstairs as well. So it's a very simple, almost boringly simple game for mobile with a wallet attached. So you have hundreds of cards that have different abilities. You compile a team and then you shoot against enemies. So it's very, very simple. The fun part though is it's all on-chain, it's all on Counterparty, and you can trade these cards with each other. And the fun part is that you can earn cards that are off-chain, merge them, upgrade them, and then tokenize them. So basically the game itself would give you the capability to issue one NFT, so one token that you can then use in the game to better defeat the enemy or whatever. And another aspect that's also been mentioned today in a couple of talks is interoperability. So some of these cards are actually used by different games and represent different things. So this is just a collectible from Spells of Genesis. That's one of the strongest cards in the game. And this is the same card in the game Zarutubi Island, where it's a monkey character with a cloak, because this guy has a cloak. So basically the same card represents different items or has different attributes in different applications, which is, again, the magic word utility, right? Because you want people to use this thing. And I don't know if any of you play Magic the Gathering or Pokemon or something. There's a game called Force of Will, primarily in the States and in Japan, and they also in 2015 wanted to bring their whole game onto the blockchain. Didn't really work out, but some of these cards can actually also be used in Spells of Genesis and in the now defunct Force of Will game. So there's a lot of overlap. The community is very tight-knit and everybody talks to everybody. There's no like walled garden or fencing off against anybody else. Rare Pipis. You're all familiar with the frog, invented in 2005 by a friendly character named Matt Fury, actually in a comic, Boys Club. I don't know why the other three didn't make it onto the internet, but the frog certainly did, right? And this is the paratypical feels good man, Rare Pipe, or Pipe, at least Pipe the Frog he was called. And then 4chan, as they're known to do, just made some shit up, and people began creating their own images of Pipe the Frog. And since only they had them, they called them rare. So as long as they were unreleased, they were called rare papers. And some idiot took all of them that he could find, burned them on a CD, and put it up on eBay. And there it reached almost $100,000 in bids before eBay took it down. Right? So they were trading NFTs before they even knew what it was. And then in 2016, in the Counterparty group, just a bunch of guys shooting the shit, they said, okay, I'm going to make a rare paper, but I'm going to make it really rare, and I'm going to make it a token. And so this guy just created 300 of these Nakamoto cards and started giving them away. Another history lesson, this is Dorian Nakamoto. He was supposedly exposed as the creator of Bitcoin, which he wasn't, or was he? I don't know, but anyway. So anyway, this my character, he took it on himself. Okay, I have these rare papers. This card is actually called Rare Paper, is the asset, the token name, and just gave it away. And so that was a lot of fun. So people made a bunch of them, and they referenced all kinds of blockchain historic events. Like you have the Mt. Gox hack, you have the DAO hack, you have the hard fork as a direct result of the fork, and then basically these scientists, as they called themselves, because at some point it was just more work than one person could do. He had 6 people join the group, and they were called the Rare Paper Scientists, and they basically curated the catalog. So it was the very first community-driven art NFT project. You can have a wonderful argument over if this is art, but downstairs you will see some that definitely fulfill that these criteria. So from 2016 to 18, almost 1,800 of these rare paper cards were issued, and at some point they just decided to close it down. So they issued a post on Paste and said, "Listen, guys, do your own thing. We're not taking care of your papers anymore." And there's a bunch of them that only exist once, like there's only one paper, or 42 times. This is a card that's only given away if you can find out who the issuer is and then talk to them, and then he asks you a question. If you can answer them, you might get gifted one of these. So there's a lot of deeply ingrained cultural references and also a very tight understanding of community. And we've had some talks here about community building. This is as grassroots as it will ever get, probably in crypto land ever again. You have to address the very sad story of paper being co-opted by the alt-right. What makes the role of the NFTs or the rare papers so important in this is that in 2021, Matt Fury actually acknowledged them as his, or as the brainchild of his, or an offspring of his Paper the Frog creation, and the community had saved a card for him, and it's card 1000. In 2017, I think, and so in 2021, basically he came back home and made this very interesting, you can probably do a lot of Freuding in here, very interesting paper, and acknowledged that the rare paper community was about peace, love, happiness, understanding, etc., and was not part of the co-opting of the alt-right, right? Because we had a lot of interesting discussions in this community also about how we would deal with this, and we've always been very proactive on taking a positive stance, right? So now you're asking yourself, how do these go on to ETH where I can actually buy them because I don't have any Bitcoin? There's a service called Emblem Finance, which basically offers a wallet as a token. So you go to Emblem Finance, you mint a wallet, you send your Bitcoin, Litecoin, Namecoin, whatever this is, Dogecoin, Shitcoin, or Tezos NFT into that wallet, and then you can trade that wallet on OpenSea, right? So basically then it becomes its own NFT. And this is then very interestingly displayed, so I don't think you can see this from far, but basically you can trace the history of the contents of this from one chain to the other, and you can also claim it and then basically put it back onto its native chain, which is really interesting because that was the first time that the NFT community at large, that was all up in CryptoPunks and apes, realized, oh, there's something else. And only the very few, very big collectors have so far took it upon themselves to do the research to actually create a Bitcoin wallet and install Counterparty and trade on the native chain of all of these NFTs. This also enables fractionalization, if that's a word. So this is 10,000 shards of this card being able to be traded on a Uniswap pool, right? And then you can buy all the shards and make an offer to everybody else, and then you can claim the emblem vault, and then you can export it back to Bitcoin. So composability of Ethereum, although we all hate it, is a very big part in how it absorbs other chains, even though there's always a little bit of gatekeeping between the different chain communities, right? Yeah, some sources. You can follow me on Twitter. Disregard the sources, just believe everything I say, or maybe the slides will be made available on the NFTBERLIN website. I do not know. And now, off the deep end you go with this newly acquired history lesson. Thank you very much.